Welcome to Season 2 of Frontline Fridays, brought to you by Ubik. I'm your host, Thurston, and this season, we're going deep on what truly drives performance on the front line: leadership, culture, and the human decisions that shape results. Today's conversation is about elevating leadership as a performance strategy, especially in luxury and premium retail, where culture, consistency, and client experience are everything. My guest is Shalonda Dean, a senior luxury retail executive with more than 25 years of experience leading high visibility markets for iconic brands like Prada Group, Balenciaga, Apple, and Intermix. Today, Shalonda is the founder of Leadership Disrupted, where she helps luxury and premium brands close the leadership gaps she's seen again and again through servant leadership, intentional structure, and her People-to-Performance Accelerator. If you believe culture isn't soft, it's strategic, this episode is for you. So let's jump into it. Shalonda, welcome to Frontline Fridays. I could not be more excited about this conversation, and I will share with the audience why in a moment, but thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to join you and get reconnected in this way.
Reconnected. So you and I, different than the nearly 40 other people I've interviewed on this show, you and I worked side by side for over 3 years running Intermix. So I joined Intermix January 2018. You were on my team, and we worked together through some highs and lows and some challenging times, and we'll cover that. But you and I have a special relationship that I very much cherish, and I'm excited to provide the opportunity for you to share more about what you've been doing and what you're doing in the future. So thank you.
Amazing. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
So as I love to start, and a word that everyone knows I used often is really, what are you most proud of reflecting on now this incredible career you've had leading people in the retail industry? What are you most proud of as we sit here today?
Yeah, so I think I'm most proud of all the leaders that I've been able to work with, the leaders that I've been able to develop, the teams that I've been able to support in their growth and development. When I really think about my journey and legacy, it really is the leaders that I've been able to help them grow, maybe help them realize something in themselves that they maybe didn't see as a goal or as a tangible title that they, might be able to reach. Kind of tying it back to your first book and that accidental career that, we all fell into. I think that, what I try to instill in everyone is there's so much value in retail because there's so many hats that we wear that we become an attractive talent that people go after because they know that retail leaders we're navigating marketing in our stores, we're navigating leading teams, we're navigating driving sales. And so that's the legacy that I like to reflect back on, those leaders that are continuing to develop more leaders even to this day.
And you are someone that I can confidently say doesn't just say that, but actually does it. It is your life's work, like finding people's light, finding their skills, finding a path that they didn't even know existed. And you use the words servant leadership. It's a language that we hear about. Again, I think there's a lot of people that say they know how to serve others, but don't show up always that way. And I know that you do. So why is that so important to you?
Yeah, it was something it was a book that was introduced to me during my time with a London-based retailer. And it was in the early part of my career. And I think what really resonated is as a retail executive, we get the opportunity to be able to remove the chaos, remove the obstacles, remove what's getting in the way for our stores and our teams to be able to deliver. And so I always, go into stores and say, I'm here to be in service and support to you and your business in the same same way that you're in support to your clients. And so, in the same ways that I want to take care of my teams, and as an executive leader, I want to impart that upon other support leaders, within the market to be able to do that as well, so that the teams can really focus on that client journey and the deliverables that, we're looking for them to drive those results.
Well, and if I think back at our time together at Intermix, I think we were at a moment after the brand had been struggling for a while. We kind of got in there together and just said, how do we serve the field? And I did feel like I remember you coming and saying, our commission structures aren't as competitive. Maybe compensation's not accurate. It's inconsistent how we run between stores. There was a lot of, I remember you saying, like, if we're going to deliver, you write the deliverables, there's work that we need to do to change it. And being part of Gap Inc., we were given some pretty free reign to say, well, if you want to change the commission structure, come up with a presentation. If you want to, we had culture awards and we changed the dress code, and we did everything we could
Thanks so
to
much.
make sure we like hired, retrained, and delivered business, which we did, record breaking business. And so
And I think
how did that feel for you?
one of the things I think we did really well was working collaboratively together, being able to, come to New York, really be able to strategize. But also, I would say, listen to our store teams and take their feedback and turn that into something tangible that they can use at store level. So, one of the memories I have is when you brought us all to New York, we used to do the quarterly decks. We would do these big decks and roll them out to the store teams and tell them to bring those decks to life in store. But instead, you had us all come into New York, and we got to do different videos and tape different segments so that those videos could be then disseminated down to the field. So now they were hearing our voices, they were hearing from the merchants, they were hearing from you. And I thought that that was one of the great takeaways that we had from really listening to our store teams, and how do we take things off of paper and use that technology so that the stores can really bring the brand to life there locally.
It was so much fun on top of it because there's momentum, the flywheel that goes into
Mhm.
effect when you're doing the right thing for the field and they can feel it and the results are great. There's a real like momentum that happens. And I think you and I could reflect on our career and think about a certain year or even a season with a certain brand where that was actually true. And then you and I had several of those.
Absolutely.
Well,
And I also think about that and, how did we keep that going forward? And so I think one of the ways we talk about, servant leadership and being able to, serve our teams is making sure they're all getting one message. And I think this was also a way that as an executive team, we were able to make sure that if you went into any store, they could say that same message that we were giving them because it was delivered in one way.
and the other piece that's interesting for you, which I know much of the audience can relate to, you are LA based. So you are LA based leader. You've run the West Coast for several brands, including the ones after for Balenciaga and Prada. You ran the West Coast for New York and subsequently European based brands, which is, I'm from LA. You and I both know LA is not New York, doesn't run the same way, doesn't think the same way. We don't dress the same way. And how did you navigate that part of being West Coast based for non West Coast based brands?
Yeah, you really have to bring the perspective of Los Angeles and other key markets in the West Coast. I think about, having a store in Hawaii, and, there are so many people that are unfamiliar, with that market. And we opened that store, with Intermix, and I've had it with other brands as well. The biggest opportunity that we had is how do we, really bring the local client base, what they're looking for, to the merchant team, to the marketing team, to the CRM team, because events look very different in, LA, maybe versus New York, or a store like Aspen or Hawaii. And so what we have to do is, ask for those conversations to be had. Sometimes it may not be a trip out to those markets. So we would, do Zoom calls, FaceTime calls. We would do remote walkthroughs to really talk about, what the stores need and bring their voice to the forefront, which was really important. And it was educating each department on what the the individual, store's need. But that relationship started with me making that a priority, and then being able to bring the store directors into the conversation and ensuring that they had those relationships and a direct line as well.
Well, because I think if you represent servant leadership can show up in many different ways. And when you work in a fashion business and a commissioned fashion luxury business, product is king. You are in service by getting them the right product. And that has been very much your mantra with me and beyond. And so how does that part of serving your teams, why was that so important to you?
I think it's important for two parts. You want to be able to have the right piece at the right time for that right customer in every single door. And we all know that that's not always the case. So I think there's an education on both sides. There's an education with the merchant team on what our stores need, but then there's also an education on the store side when we think about that omni-channel mindset, being able to resource that and find that product, that you need. So the education goes both ways. You're not going to have everything for every customer at every moment, but you will have access to it for sure. And I think that is, work that we got to do together specifically during our time at Intermix. And it's a conversation that carried on in other brands, as well as the retail climate has shifted over the years, especially, during COVID.
So I want to jump to where you had shared with me, one of the most uncomfortable times in your career, because if we reflect on our career in retail, there are times when the flywheel's turning and there are times when the flywheel's stuck. And you and I, another thing you and I have in common is we both ran Apple stores in early Apple years. And so I would say it was also, I learned a lot, but not my favorite experience. Why was it also challenging for you?
With Apple, I wasn't nervous until I started training and I started realizing I was like, okay, this is going to be very different because I could walk into any, fashion retail store. I knew the product, I knew the metrics, I knew the customer. And then, I went to Apple and it was like, yes, I was bringing my leadership background, but I didn't know a gigahertz from a gigabyte and, what all those, tech specs meant. And I think that's when it really sunk in is there's a technical aspect here that I'm not proficient in, but there is a reason that I am here sitting at the table for this training. And so you really have to lean into, what your why, and knowing that there's a reason for you to be here and the rest will come. And so you lean into what what's comfortable, and leaning into being uncomfortable. And so I think those are initial thoughts when joining Apple and sitting in that first training. And I was like, okay, there are some things here that I don't know, but what I do know is leading people and leading teams.
And the rest of it will come, or you will find someone else, that can be the expert when you aren't too.
Absolutely, and that's when I learned the mantra of, "I don't know, let me figure it out." And that's something that, I've carried with me, no matter, what role we're in or what we're doing. To your point, that's where that collaboration comes in and taking partnership, to get things done.
I think another often common level of being uncomfortable is when you move into luxury and there's a client that maybe lives in a world or a way that you don't understand or you've never done.
Mhm.
Like, how have you navigated that with teams? Because I've experienced it myself where you start helping celebrities. Like there's a lot that goes into all of a sudden I'm uncomfortable around these people because I don't know how to act. How have you navigated that with your teams?
Yeah, I think, when you're going from a, contemporary brand, you get a small taste of that through studio services and, working with stylists and things like that. But then when you go into, full blown luxury, as I like to call it, you're working with a client that maybe doesn't necessarily want to come into the store. You're maybe working with their assistant or two assistants. And so as we're working with the store teams, it's really approaching it from a relationship standpoint. That is always the basis of what we want to be doing in our stores today is focusing in on that relationship, getting to know them. It's not about what they're purchasing or what they're buying initially. You want to be able to build that rapport and connection first and foremost. And so that's where you start. And once you, again, kind of like being comfortable with being uncomfortable at first, and then you come back and talk to them after that first interaction or that second interaction that they had maybe with that, celebrity or well-known person, then they're going to lunch with them or they're going to their house to, drop product off because they built that trust and earned that respect. And so I think that's where you start is with the relationship and the connection, and support from leaders, I think comes into play as well, and being side by side with their team members and even or executive leaders. During my time at Prada, I would join some of the dinners and the lunches with the store teams and their clients, which was a real treat because we don't always get to do that.
How has it changed the way you think about coaching today? Like your own personal experiences through the different kinds of businesses you've led and different client base, different leaders. How has that showed up for you now?
Coaching for me is being naturally curious. I don't want to, give the teams the answers. I want it to be a conversation where they're able to, have some time to ruminate with their ideas, be able to throw their ideas out to me. So my first question is always, well, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should handle this? Let's talk through it. And 90% of the time, they land at the right answer. But it's just because I was able to give them the opportunity to have that conversation and get their thoughts out. And that could be with a leader, it could be with a sales associate, it could be with a back of house team member. And I think that's where they earn trust in their leaders as well and in the executive team because they know and feel like I have a voice and this person trusts my decision making. The more we're able to do that. And before you know it, they're coming to you and the conversation is now changed to say, this is my problem. This is how I think I should handle it. What do you think? And those conversations become a lot shorter.
And rewarding for you as a leader. You can see it reflected back in the work that you've done in so many ways. I think it's the proud moments in all of us.
Being entrepreneurial, absolutely. Yeah. You see them standing a little taller with their head and their shoulders up a little stronger as well.
Such a joy. So let's jump forward to today and let's move into the future. So you left Prada toward the end of last year, running the West Coast, and you've said to yourself, it's time for Shalonda to make some major changes in the industry. Or I won't even say industry because, what we learn in retail translates across everything. So you said, I need to share my wisdom and my skills and my voice in a new way. So tell us what that looks like for 2025, 2026 and beyond.
Yes. Back in October, my time at Prada, came to an end, and I had the opportunity to really think about what I wanted to do next. And it would have been very easy for me to, start applying at other brands to, find a similar type of role. But I knew I'd be coming up against some of the same obstacles that I was seeing in every brand I've worked in. And that is really, how do we make leadership operationalized? How do we make it systemic across all doors? How do we remove those, the chaos and the noise that our leaders, and our teams deal with day in and day out? And how can I address it on a grander scale? And that's where my business came about, which is called Leadership Disrupted. And it is, how do we help support stores with the tools and resources that they need to operationalize and just really bring a rhythm across the day-to-day operations in our store teams, with our store teams.
Share an example of one that you really have seen as like, if we remove this, if we disrupted this, the outcome would be positive. Give me an example of that.
Yeah, I think about, every region and every brand, you have those 2 or 3 hero leaders. They're doing it all correctly, but then you have maybe the rest of the region that's struggling in different areas. So how do we take what those leaders are doing and really bring those best practices to the forefront, but not just to the forefront, not just sharing with their peers, but really put it into a playbook that everyone can use, day in and day out. I think about the inconsistent performance across stores as well. And this is a way that you can address it with everyone doing the same thing every week, every day, and you're going to see those results change dramatically.
Part of what you've built is a framework because any successful business has a framework of what it stands for. And you've phrased it as people to performance, a people to performance accelerator. And so walk us through that because just those words alone get me excited. Like anything you can accelerate and deliver even better business. And reflecting on your comment around like we find those people who do
Mhm.
extraordinary work. It can sometimes feel like a mystery. Like
Mhm.
what's different about that? And so when I think about people to performance accelerator, you're right. You take the best of what works and
Mhm.
then accelerate it, like add fuel to
Absolutely.
it. So walk me through that.
It's a 12-week program, and like you said, it's called the People-to-Performance Accelerator, and through these 12 weeks, we go through these 5 drivers, if you will, and so the first step is to really decode what's going on, what are the gaps, what's missing, what's working, what's not working, and then we move into the direct. Let's look at the playbook, let's start giving stores what they need, that the playbook to do those one-to-ones, to do those daily huddles, the things that we want all of our stores doing, not just a couple of them. But the key word there is consistency. That's going to be the most important thing is making sure it's consistent, not only on the leadership side, but also with the team and the executive leaders as well. And then we move into how do we deepen this within the culture of our leaders and our store teams? How do we look at the bench that we currently have, the culture that we have within our stores to make sure that we are feeding into our leaders as they are looking to grow within their respective positions. And then we move to develop. We look at our talent heat map. We look at our bench. How are we building up our assistant managers within our stores, our key holders for the next level? So we want the executive team to really walk away with their talent bench 6 months out, 12 months out, and how do we foster the development for these key leaders within our stores? And then we want something that's going to last. So after these 12 weeks, how do we make sure that this is going to be able to be implemented with future leaders that join the organization? And that's that drive step where the standards become something that can scale over time.
There's so much in there, I think. And the interesting part as you're describing it is there may be an assumption that a large organization, an Apple or a luxury brand, has all this nailed and that they do these steps really well and that this is for small brands. But in my experience, I'm curious if you agree, just because it's large doesn't mean that they do these 5 steps that you've just described really well. And sometimes small brands maybe are founder led or they came from retail, someone like you, and they just like they know all the like the steps to get there. And so what's your goal here as you roll out Leadership Disrupted? Is it large brand, small brand, startup? Who is it?
Yeah, I think the goal is I think about the brands that are sitting in that 1 to 5 store range, but it really, to your point, is for everyone. It really is an opportunity for us to take, leadership from being a personality to something that is system driven. And so that can be for a very large brand with, 20 to 30 stores, or it could be for that brand that is just starting out. They have that one brick and mortar store, and now they're looking to grow to 2 to 3 stores. It's very easy to wrap your arms around a few stores, but once you get to 5 to 10 to 15, this people to performance accelerator is what's going to help you ensure that no matter if you're in New York, LA, Miami, or even up there in Seattle, Washington, everyone's doing it the same way. And that's how you can really measure results to see if the behaviors are working within your stores.
And one thing that was often shared with me as I've come in and to be honest, tried to implement a lot also what you're describing. You've just put a framework to it, but in my mind, I'm like, yep, done that makes sense. Is every store and team feels like they're often an exception. Like, well, that's not how it works here. Or my customer doesn't do that, or my team wants this. And my response, and I'd be curious yours, is if you can free up some of the operational noise around you, it gives time back to coaching, to customer experiences, to merchandising. It should free you, not cuff you. And so, what is that? How have you addressed that so far? And maybe in your career too.
Yeah, no, I think that there's always competing priorities. And I always say, thinking about running a store today versus 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's very different. There's even more, noise, if you will, to your point. There's more, everything is a key priority. Everything is urgent. Everything is right now. And so that's where, I think about this People to Performance Accelerator. It's giving our leadership the tools to understand that while everything is important, you have to make time and carve out time for that consistency, for those touch bases, for those one to ones. How do you show up differently, as a leader to be able to get everything done? How do you get uncomfortable and ask for help and say, "Hey, this is getting in the way. This is where I need help. This is where I need you to help me remove an obstacle." And that's where, as an executive team, as a founder, as a CEO, we get the opportunity to listen and really understand what's getting in the way, but we have to give a solution to that, pretty quickly. And I think that becomes very important is how do we create shared rhythm across our stores and make sure that there is a strategy in place to minimize the noise but also while making sure that everything is getting done within our stores or even within the field organization.
Shared Rhythm is such a great title for a book. I'm gonna have to
Yes.
Shared
Love
Rhythm.
that one.
And the other piece that happens, and you and I experience this together, is that when leadership is aligned and said there's one message, and so we've disrupted, we've put into, maybe it's your 5 pillars. We're very aligned as a leadership team. Culture changes, retention improves, results delivered, like the output of what you're describing. And I think culture wise is more necessary than ever. We're always fighting a retention number in retail, and it's not gotten better. It's not inherently better today than it was a decade ago. So how have you addressed that and thinking about alignment as a leadership team?
Yeah, I think, when I think about where leadership is today, we were just talking about, all the different variables, within the business. And that's where the burnout conversation comes. That's where, when leaders don't feel like they're being heard, they're moving on to, another brand. We think about our hero leaders that carry the brand DNA, when they move on. And then, there's a trickle down effect there. And so there is this false narrative. If you push for results and you burn people out, that's not the case. It's the chaos that burns the people out. You can push for results, but you have to have a strategy in place and tools in place to make sure that store teams can deliver. And so that's what becomes, very important, within our stores. And when you're aligned as an executive team and everyone is creating that same message, it becomes a lot easier for the stores to just focus on the business and those deliverables and supporting their teams to do the same because these team members are a business within a business when we think about our sales associates and our stylists.
And when you think about businesses that are particularly challenged, often out of their control, think about LA and fires last year, or things that happen in different parts of the country, completely out of their control. So how do you think about leading consistently, but also individually at the same time?
Yeah, I think, it's the control what you can control and, getting back to the basics. And I know it sounds, very simple, but that's truly what it is. When we think about what we went through, with COVID, when we think about what we went through, to your point, with the fires last year here in Los Angeles, it became about checking in with our clients and less about, that outreach around sales. And so those are the things that we could control. We could control the people that were walking in the door and creating an exceptional experience for them. We couldn't control maybe some of the international, tourism that was impacted. But we did take partnership, with our executive team to bring some in-store events, into the store. Again, it wasn't about selling. It was just about community and bringing people together, but also with a fashion focus, especially around Grammys and other, great events that were happening during that time. So it's, quieting what's going on, outside for the leaders and saying, what would our clients love to see from us right now? What would our team members love to see from us right now? And it's taking partnership as an executive team and saying, how can we show up and be in the front lines with the teams? We had so many people that were coming out for some of these events, as well. And so I think showing up and being present and being side by side with our store teams becomes very important so we can see what's going on, firsthand. And again, it's getting that first line feedback from the people that are on the sales floor, and that's our store teams.
What and how have you made that such a priority, Shalonda? Because often, and I hear this at conferences, the feedback is, I'd love to see executives in stores more often, or if I could only share what I know could fix this business, I could change the world. How have you made that a priority as an executive in the field? Because it's really easy to get caught up on your laptop and stuck in the office, and there's no shortage of things to do. And I've tried to do that, some myself, of like morning meetings or touch bases, but how why is that such a priority for you?
There's no shortage of calls, that's for sure. But, for me, I've always been, a lead from the front type of leader. And, yes, all of those calls are important. Those off the floor conversations, are very important. But how do we protect that peak time? It's about quality time and the quantity that you're spending on the floor. So it is more impactful to be on the floor as an executive leader for 2 to 3 hours if you're on a store visit versus popping out every 15 minutes in between calls throughout the day. And it's also being upfront and giving clarity to your team. This is what my day looks like. I'm looking forward to spending X amount of hours from this time to this time on the floor with you. These are the things that I want to cover, but I also want you to come to the conversation with the things that you're looking to cover and what you want to walk through in the store, as well. I think I have a little bit of an advantage being on the West Coast because the calls do die off around 2 o'clock. So I do have that advantage. But I think, if you're, a founder or a CEO or, another executive, out there, it really is prioritizing and carving out that time. Even if it's 1 hour, there's so much value in that. And there's so much that you can learn. And it means so much to the store teams. So plan ahead, give that clarity, and make it impactful.
That impact isn't about you. I keep saying that, but it's not them learning your mission. It's
Absolutely.
you as an executive learning what they need.
And speak to everyone, back of house, the visual team, find that time to connect with everyone within those four walls.
What advice are you most passionate about sharing with leaders today? What do you tell young leaders or people entering retail, or those that, you and I have a lot of people in common who probably reach out to both of us and say, Shalonda, I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. I need help. What advice are you sharing today with people?
I think the first thing is, leadership isn't a role, it's a weekly discipline. I think that's first and foremost. It's something that you are doing every day, every week. It's a discipline, it's a rhythm that you build for yourself. And I think the other thing is it doesn't happen overnight. I think we all have a story of our journey and, how we got here. And it's because we showed up, we did the work, we asked the right questions, we let our leaders know where our interests lie. I think that's so important. Be very clear on what you want to do. I think oftentimes we get in these conversations and it's, I want to do VM, I want to do ops, I want to sell, I want to run a store one day. And that's where we as leaders get to help guide and steer that conversation through career experiences and giving them opportunities to show up in different ways. But it takes time. But the other part is making sure that your leader knows what you want to do and foster those relationships outside of your store, across your network. And having a mentor, I think, is super helpful also, no matter what role you're in. Ron, you've been a mentor to me over the years, even after we, wrapped up our time at Intermix together. And so I would say retail's very small. It comes full circle, and you never know who you're going to cross paths with again. So always take the time to curate those relationships, no matter where you are. If you're somewhere for a year or 2 years, there's so much value in that moment. So always take full advantage of any training opportunities that are available as well.
I would say don't be afraid of the brands that intimidate you.
Oh,
And it's the same.
absolutely.
You and I didn't start in luxury, but ended up there. It doesn't. It's very. It's as welcoming as you want to make it, and the
Mhm.
impact is as powerful as the work you want to put into it. And you've been such a shining example of that, of making it happen. for
And that's
all kinds of different brands.
yeah, that's where the growth happens is where you're uncomfortable. I always say have audacity, especially in 2026. So, if you get nervous, then you're on the right track. That means that might be somewhere you wanna go because that's where you can grow. That's where you can learn. It's easy to stay comfortable.
So where can people find you, Shalonda, to learn more about you and all your work?
Absolutely. So you can find Leadership Disrupted on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can also find us on our website, theleadershipdisrupted.com. And you can find me, Shalonda Dean, on LinkedIn as well.
Well, this was a joy for me, so thank you. To
Thank
be able
you.
to provide a platform for you to share your continued growth and success and power and expertise. I can't share enough, what a phenomenal leader you are. So those that are lucky enough to work with you it would really be a gift to have you join and coach and implement what you know to their organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. It's been an honor. And I look forward to Leadership Disrupted getting out there to everyone and our continued relationship and your support. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Shalonda.
Thank you, Ron.
Shalonda has shown us that when we invest in people, aligned leaders, and build cultures rooted in trust and accountability, performance isn't forced. It's a natural progression of your team. And for everyone listening, here's your challenge this week. Take a look at your team and ask yourself, who am I developing? Who am I lifting up? And where am I leading by service instead of control? Because when you elevate leadership, you elevate everything else. Thanks for tuning in, and a special thanks to Ubik, the presenter of Frontline Fridays. Ubik is the AI-powered platform that helps retail and hospitality leaders connect, train, and empower their teams. Ready to make your frontline your competitive advantage? Visit Ubik.com. That's YOOBIC.com to learn more. Until next time, keep leading boldly and keep putting your people first.